driving the conversation, making sense of the news.
Hello everyone, welcome to Making Sense of the News with me, Njideka Maduka. Here we break down the headlines, dig beneath the surface and connect the dots. It's the first episode and I'm so delighted to have you. Today we're making sense of Pat Utomi's proposed shadow government. Earlier this month, the renowned political economist unveiled what he described as a shadow government. Now, according to him, membership of this shadow government or shadow cabinet will be drawn from a cross-section of Nigeria's opposition parties, and their job will be to scrutinize government actions, identify policy failures, and propose alternative solutions in key areas, including the economy, education, healthcare, infrastructure, law and order, and constitutional reform. When he made the announcement, he drew membership from across various fields. The renowned human rights lawyer, Professor Pat Utomi, will be leading the Ombudsman and Good Governance portfolio. The Policy Delivery Unit, he said, will have members like Ogene Momo, Chetawanze, Daniel Ikunobe, Halima Ahmed, David Okonkwo, and Obi Ajuga. They're quite under appointments. I think I counted about 28 of them, so there are quite a good number of them there. Now, before I proceed, let me point out the fact that Pat Utomi is someone who has been around. He didn't just stumble on discussing national issues. I remember while growing up, he was a regular face on television. Looking back now, I imagine he was a well-sought-after resource person because of his background in economy, the knowledge he has when it comes to broader economic issues. Now, if you're in the media, you should understand the difference a resource person brings to your show. They bring insight, they bring clarity on a subject matter, making it quite explicit to the audience. The audience gets to appreciate that even when they don't say it often. So, Utomi in those days appeared like the perfect picture of a public servant or leader, but unfortunately, he was not in government. I also remember watching his television program then called Patito's Gang. For some reason, we found that program quite engaging, even as young adults or even teenagers. Teenagers have a way of being entertainment inclined. Basically, this is just saying that Pat Utomi has been around, taking part in national conversations. But I think he got tired at some point, with just the talks and wanted to be involved in the action. And that was when he started vying for political positions. If you go way back in 2007, he was the presidential candidate of the African Democratic Congress, ADC. In 2011, he was given the presidential ticket for Social Democratic Mega Party, SDMP. But he withdrew at the last minute for another candidate in another party, specifically Ibrahim Shekarau of the All Nigeria People's Party, who was also a factional governorship candidate of the APC in Delta State in 2019. Fast forward to 2023, he withdrew for Peter Obi under the Labour Party for the presidential race. At various times, he had also talked about a coalition or a third force to wrestle power from the ruling party. But right about now, Pat Utomi has given up on contesting, and he said, that was what he said a few days after announcing the shadow government. And for me, based on what I've been able to observe, I've established a pattern and come to see Pat Utomi in three distinct lights. First of all, we have Pat Utomi, the public intellectual, the analyst, the policy thinker, the one who was always giving insights on governance, on economy. And then we have Pat Utomi, the politician, the one who threw his heart into the ring, trying to contest for electoral positions. And finally, we have Pat Utomi, the opposition, and that's the Pat Utomi that recently announced the shadow government. Now, when I first heard the news of the shadow government, I found it quite interesting, mostly because I already have some idea of what a shadow government is. And for some people who may be curious, what exactly is a shadow government? When you talk about a shadow government or a shadow cabinet, is traditionally rooted in parliamentary democracies. When you talk about countries like the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, is a system where you have senior members from the opposition party in the legislative house who mirror the positions of actual government ministers. For example, in the United Kingdom, where we have a Secretary of State for Education, because they don't use minister like we do here, if they have a Secretary of State for Education, their position would appoint a Shadow Secretary of State for Education, who is a Member of Parliament. If there's a Secretary of State for Environment from the ruling party, their position will have Shadow Secretary of State for Environment. Their role basically will be to study government policies, offer constructive criticism, and present alternative ideas to the public. Currently in the UK, we have Nigerian-born Kemi Badenoch as the minority leader. Because she is the minority leader, she's the shadow prime minister, while Keir Starmer is the actual prime minister. Now, Badenoch has her own shadow cabinet, like shadow chancellor of the Exchequer, shadow secretary of state for foreign commonwealth and development affairs, and on it goes. This way, they not only hold the ruling government accountable, but also stay ready to assume office should they win future elections. And now, because they have been following government policies, scrutinizing them, they don't enter into government clueless or inadequately prepared. Coming back to Nigeria, if Nigeria was practicing the shadow cabinet, the PDP currently, as the major opposition, would be forming this shadow cabinet, scrutinizing every government ministry and minister and presenting alternative views and solutions to issues. For example, the time President Tinubu announced the subsidy is gone and price of fuel and other commodities escalated, the PDP members in the parliament with the shadow cabinet positions would have come up with strong alternative views and positions. Maybe a shadow minister of petroleum or finance could have come up with alternative solutions. But here's the thing. Nigeria runs a presidential system, not a parliamentary system. So technically, the concept of a shadow government is not recognized in our constitution. But when you look at the UK, that system is not in the constitution, but they just established it as a tradition. But you know how we are in the country. If it's not in the constitution, someone is bound to raise an eyebrow or shout illegal, just like some people are doing, including lawyers, when it comes to Pat Utomi's move. However, I think one of the fundamental questions we should ask is, what will a shadow cabinet do that the opposition parties under the current presidential system cannot do? Why did Utomi go for a shadow government instead of becoming an opposition figure as envisaged in our kind of representative democracy? If you look at his press statement when he announced the shadow government, what I could deduce as part of his reasons is the belief that opposition party members are being swallowed up by the ruling party. If you look at the recent developments in Nigeria's political space, the factions have become a norm, with the ruling party being accused of orchestrating such moves. So basically, few people are left to play the opposition role. In the absence of opposition members, it's just logical for people like Utomi to come up with another way of playing the opposition. But at this juncture, one has to ask again, can't opposition be played without any special nomenclature attached to it? Is it impossible for Utomi and co. to scrutinize government policies and activities without the cloak of a shadow cabinet? Now, this question is necessary because governments after governments in Nigeria have been found to label such moves as usurpation of power, even when there is no power, real power being usurped. And we have the DSS now dragging Utomi to court. And I don't know if we shouldn't be kissing the shadow government goodbye already. But in further analysis, if the shadow government will be allowed to function, how would it operate? In a parliamentary system of government, such as practiced in the UK, one of the things that make the shadow cabinet thrive is the fact that they are given the chance and specific days in parliament to question government policies and officials, including the prime minister. That's what is called opposition days. On such days, the opposition sets the agenda for discourse, question the ruling cabinet members or even the Prime Minister with motions that may show lack of faith in government policies, thereby opening up the people to understanding what is going on in government. Those debates are most times televised. Now, without such platforms, does Pat Utomi's shadow cabinet have alternative means to engage the government on its policies to bring the Nigerian people to understand how those in government are running the country? Beyond press statements and television interviews, which is what opposition likes to do in this country, can they come up with ideas on how the government of the day can be made to pay serious attention to what members of the shadow government are saying, ideas on how the masses can fully understand government policies and begin to make better electoral choices? Also, when members of the shadow government have the time and commitment and resources to play this role. I remember after the 2023 election, Labour Party presidential candidate Peter B held a press conference vowing to play the role of opposition like never before. Has he lived up to expectations? Is a question I will leave you to answer. The opposition role should be a serious business. It's beyond press releases and interviews. It also goes beyond a particular term or nomenclature. It's about understanding issues and transferring such understanding to the people. With such, the people themselves become the opposition. They own the opposition. But sadly, on a final note, even when an effective opposition is played under whatever guise, I'm afraid the sentimental nature which our electoral process has taken leaves one with no hope. That's it on this week's episode of Making Sense of the News with me, Njideka Maduka. Now tell me what you think. What do you think of Pat Utomi's proposed shadow cabinet or government? Does Nigeria need it, or is it just a distraction? Should federal government be invested in the shadow cabinet or just ignore it? Do drop your comments below, like and also share this podcast. If you're on YouTube, you can subscribe to my channel at NjidekaMaduka on air and other social media platforms. This podcast is available on podcast platforms like Spotify, Podchaser, Spreaker as well. So do well to follow up. Let's make sense of the news together, one headline at a time. See you again.
Driving the conversation, making sense of the news.